History is filled with epic conflicts that shape nations. But what about the wars that are quietly forgotten, fading into the footnotes of textbooks? Today, we're diving deep into one such conflict, Egypt's forgotten war, a brutal and defining struggle that has been overshadowed by the larger events of its time. This is the story of the North Yemen Civil War, a clash on the sands that became Egypt's very own Vietnam. The year is 1962. In the ancient land of Yemen, a military coup topples the monarchy, establishing the Yemen Arab Republic. This sparks a firestorm. Royalist forces, loyal to the deposed king, rise up, backed by Saudi Arabia and Jordan. On the other side, the newly formed Republican government calls for help, and one man answers with the full might of his nation. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the charismatic leader of Egypt. Nasser saw this as a golden opportunity. He was the champion of Pan-Arabism, a vision of a unified, modern Arab world free from old monarchies and Western influence. Supporting the Yemeni Republicans was a perfect way to export his revolutionary ideals and expand Egypt's sphere of influence. He believed it would be a quick, decisive victory, a showcase of Egyptian power. He sent a small expeditionary force, confident they would secure the new government and be home in a matter of weeks. He couldn't have been more wrong. What was supposed to be a swift intervention quickly spiraled into a grueling, protracted war. The Yemeni terrain was a nightmare for a conventional army. Mountainous, rugged, and unforgiving, it was the perfect playground for the royalist guerrilla fighters. These tribesmen knew the land like the back of their hand. Supplied by Saudi Arabia with weapons and money, they launched hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and raids, melting back into the mountains before the Egyptian forces could effectively respond. The Egyptians were fighting an invisible enemy in a foreign land, their modern army. With its tanks and aircraft, was often ineffective against the guerrilla tactics of the royalists. Morale among the Egyptian soldiers began to plummet. They were far from home, fighting for a cause many didn't fully understand, in a brutal environment. The initial optimism faded, replaced by the grim reality of a quagmire. The number of Egyptian troops swelled from a few thousand to over 70,000 at its peak, a massive commitment of manpower and resources. The war became a massive drain on Egypt's economy. The cost of maintaining a large army so far from home was staggering. Resources that could have been used for development and improving the lives of Egyptians were instead being funneled into a seemingly endless conflict in Yemen. This financial strain began to cripple the nation, but Nasser, driven by pride and his pan-Arab ambitions, found it impossible to withdraw. Pulling out would be a sign of weakness, a major blow to his prestige across the Arab world. The human cost was devastating. Tens of thousands of Egyptian soldiers lost their lives, not just in combat, but also from disease and the harsh conditions. For the families back home, it was a period of great anxiety and loss. The war was rarely discussed openly in the state-controlled media, creating a strange silence around a conflict that was consuming so many lives. It became the unspoken tragedy in countless Egyptian households. Meanwhile, the war in Yemen was a proxy battleground for the larger Cold War and regional rivalries. Egypt, backed by the Soviet Union, was facing off against the Saudi-backed royalists, who received support from the West. It was a complex web of alliances and enmities, with Yemenis, both Republican and Royalist, paying the highest price. The country was ravaged, with estimates of over 200,000 casualties, many of them civilians caught in the crossfire. By 1967, Egypt was in a precarious position. The army was bogged down in Yemen, its best units and commanders committed to a war with no end in sight. This had a disastrous consequence that Nasser never foresaw. When tensions with Israel escalated in May and June of 1967, the Egyptian military was stretched thin. Its focus and resources were divided. The experience in Yemen had exhausted the army and depleted its equipment. The result was the Six-Day War. In a stunningly swift and decisive campaign, Israel dealt a catastrophic blow to the combined armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The Egyptian Air Force was destroyed on the ground, and the Sinai Peninsula was captured. It was a humiliating defeat for Nasser and the entire Arab world. Many historians argue that Egypt's deep entanglement in Yemen was a major contributing factor to this disaster. The army was not prepared for a two-front war, and its performance in 1967 reflected the years of attrition and had suffered in the mountains of Yemen. The defeat in the Six-Day War was the final nail in the coffin for Egypt's Yemeni adventure. Humbled and facing a new existential threat from Israel, Nasser had no choice but to cut his losses. At the 1967 Khartoum Arab Summit, he agreed to withdraw all Egyptian troops from Yemen in exchange for Saudi Arabia ending its support for the royalists and providing financial aid to Egypt. The withdrawal was completed by the end of the year. The Egyptian soldiers came home, not as heroes of a victorious campaign, but as survivors of a long, bloody, and ultimately futile war. The North Yemen civil war would continue for a few more years, eventually ending in a compromise that saw the Republicans remain in power, but with royalists integrated into the new government. So why is this major conflict, which lasted for 5 years and cost so many lives, so often forgotten? It's largely because it's been overshadowed by the more dramatic events that followed. The monumental defeat of 1967 and the subsequent Arab-Israeli conflicts captured the world's attention, pushing the Yemen war into the background. For Egypt, it was a chapter of national trauma and strategic failure, a painful memory that many preferred not to dwell on. The war in Yemen serves as a powerful cautionary tale. It shows how a seemingly simple intervention can escalate into a disastrous quagmire. It demonstrates the limits of conventional military power against a determined insurgency on home turf. And it highlights how regional ambitions, when pursued without a clear exit strategy, can lead to devastating and unintended consequences. The echoes of this forgotten war can still be felt today. It reshaped the political landscape of the Arabian Peninsula and left deep scars on the collective psyche of Egypt. It was a defining moment for a generation, a crucible that tested the limits of an army and the ambitions of a leader. A clash on the Nile that spilled onto the sands of Yemen, a forgotten war that deserves to be remembered. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into a lesser-known part of history. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what other forgotten histories you'd like us to explore. We'll see you in the next one.